Andy Napoli, good morning. We're going to talk about VA disability today.
Yeah, sounds good, Paul. Good morning.
I have been talking a bit on how VA healthcare works, as that's been part of my journey. But in a conversation with you, you've been on a path with the disability side. First of all, I want to put a big warning label up here. We are just a couple of dudes talking about VA disability, not experts, not VSOs, or anyone who has any training on this.
That's correct. Yeah, I think it's important that everybody understands there's probably a lot of variability in the system, and we'll maybe talk about some potential sources of that. But I, Paul and I thought that you and I thought that it would be important to just share one guy's experience with the process.
Right. So talk through how you got the idea of it, how you got started on it, and kind of just tell me the story you told me.
Yeah. So as we've discussed in the past, you and I served together in a 24th ID and participated in Desert Storm First Gulf War. I went on to stay on active duty for a total of about 16 years. But during that time on active duty and afterwards would receive mailings. I think in the early years, it was about trying to do some research on something that maybe became the Gulf War syndrome or something like that. There were also some stories out there in the sort of the 5 to 10 years right after about certain units coming down with certain ailments and sicknesses and illnesses and diseases. I stayed pretty close to my unit. So, I was a company XO at the time, company commander, platoon leaders, and NCOs, and we just talk to each other and say, "Hey, how are you feeling? What's going on?" So, flash forward. Now it's probably the last 5 years or so, so much more recent. Started receiving mailings from the VA, and I think most of us receive these. I seem to remember that a lot of them were Gulf War oriented. You served during this time, and it seemed like a very proactive attempt on the part of the VA to reach out to us to see if we had any issues and potentially file for a claim. So let me pause there because I think you received the same things, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So, and I will admit that up until a certain point where I actually engaged with the process, I was not dismissive, but I would just say, "Hey, that's not for me. I'm feeling okay, just normal aches and pains and that sort of thing." But I had two conversations prior to me actually initiating the sequence, and I actually looked at some of the paperwork. So September of 2023, so September of last year,
Okay.
is when I submitted my claim to the VA for disability benefits. And I had two conversations separately. One was with a retired first sergeant here in Savannah, and we were just kind of shooting it. And he said one day that he retired with full disability, 100%. And that it was common for those of his generation who served multiple times, overseas in Afghanistan, in Iraq, for that to happen. And so it's just kind of like, okay, got it, noted. Then I had another conversation with active duty colonel. He was a brigade commander in 1st Armored Division. It happened to be a cadet that we sponsored when I was teaching in the math department back in the 90s. And he said that it was very common for veterans to leave and retire from the Army with some degree of disability benefit. I don't remember that happening when you and I were in. I don't. Maybe it was happening back then, but I don't recall it being that sort of. I got the sense that it was a proactive process. And so, anyway, second data point. Got another letter. So I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and initiate a claim. And filled out the exhaustive paperwork. My approach to this was, you know what? I'm just going to go head to toe and just put down everything every ailment that I've been experienced, that I've experienced in my life since I was a cadet, right?
Yeah.
And so I was throwing in things like hypertension. So I've always had high blood pressure, maybe some cholesterol issues. But more notably, I was having some musculoskeletal type things. So pain in my ankles, soreness, tightness, elbows, hands really became an issue for me in the last 10 years or so. Hands, fingers, joints. Lower back pain emerged. And I had an awful case of sciatica back, probably 10 years ago. When I had that looked at by a neurosurgeon, he said that it was just degenerative, likely from just all the wear and tear of life in general, being a soldier.
Right.
So I just filled out that exhaustive paperwork, just listed every single thing that I'd been feeling over the years, and put it in the system online. Great portal. It was actually easier than I thought it would be, and just waited.
Mm-hmm.
So, and by the way, I went into this with like zero expectations. If it's possible to have negative expectations, I didn't think this was going to go anywhere.
They're going to start taking money from you for being capable.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And also, by the way, I'd heard all these horror stories about just the VA being a really cumbersome, inefficient, organization to deal with. I was pleasantly surprised at the functionality of their portal in the process.
Right.
So I started getting return pings from the VA. Hey, we received your information. Mm-hmm. Your file's in process. Expect this kind of, sort of amount of time for things to get reviewed. Okay, sounds good. By the way, I didn't supply any medical records. This is an important point. I don't even know where my medical records from 16 years active duty, and Rob and I have moved around a bunch, so been in different systems. So there's not, for me personally, there's not like one cohesive, integrated set of medical records. But they do ask you for them, and I said Northwestern, medical in Chicago, where we spent a bunch of time most recently, probably has the most comprehensive view of me. But I didn't have any. And they said, okay, just provide a link and your permission to Northwestern. So I did that. I got a letter saying, hey, Northwestern hasn't responded, ping them. So I pinged Northwestern on an app and said, please release my records or something like that.
Right.
Crickets, not hearing anything. Then I get called in to do essentially an in-person exam. This probably took, I think, roughly 2 or 3 months into the process. Mm-hmm. And I went to a local clinic here in Savannah. It was not a VA clinic. It was a clinic that provides services, I believe, for the VA. We don't have a big VA clinic here in Savannah. And I met with a PA, and this was my first of 2 meetings. And she was nice, approachable, but kind of, all my probing questions about the process and how does it work. And she was fairly neutral about everything. I said, okay. She went through my interview, all the issues. She did some range of motion tests, mm-hmm. Bend over, touch your toes, right. Hands, elbows, shoulders, that sort of thing. Then took a number of x-rays on the spot of all the places that I had been, that I had listed down as issues. Again, not committal at all about the process and everything. So I left, and then another couple weeks goes by, maybe a month or so, and I get another notice to come in for a follow-up exam, essentially, or in-person meeting. I go to the same clinic. And oh, by the way, they are extremely proactive. Like you set the meeting up, the appointment online. They call you repeatedly. Do you need help? They even reimbursed mileage. It's like 2 miles from where I live, and I got a check in the mail from the VA for, $10 or whatever for the travel, literally.
Yeah.
So I go back in for the second visit, same list of questions. I actually had to fill it out in paper again, almost exactly. So I just dumped all the same information in there.
Right.
This time I sat down with the PA, different PA, and this meeting was a little different in that she probed on Desert Storm, specifically burn pits, as I think about the conversation, and asked me if I was around them. Yes, I answered, affirmatively. Also, we were, my unit, combat engineers, we were blowing up a lot of ordnance, sort of, artillery rounds, munitions that were found all over, Iraq when we were during Desert Storm.
Right.
And I asked her some questions about the process and, what does this all mean? How does it work? And she actually shared with me that her opinion mattered. She used this phrase, I wrote it down, greater than 50%.
Right.
And she said, I'm going to form an opinion. And I took another few x-rays, did some range of motion stuff. And then I'm going to supply my medical opinion to the VA process. And that's all she said. I said, okay.
And this is a key point to highlight, is that there's a person in this process who will assess the situation, like take all the evidence,
That's right.
An assessment. So, so note
Absolutely.
that it's not
you have person-to-person variability. Yeah. So I don't know what happened with the first visit, but she was a very different. It was just a very different engagement style, to be honest with you. Anyway, somebody in the VA decided check in on this guy again and confirm or deny certain things. So then I go back. At this point, still not feeling optimistic about anything.
Right.
And I get a letter, and I'm looking at it right now, in February, so late February of this year, right? And it essentially is the results. It's providing the results of the claim. And without going into all the details, I ended up getting a disability rating. And interestingly, it is the way they expressed it is percentages for different things that were happening. And literally fingers on my hands, right and left. So 10 opportunities, 10 fingers.
Right.
And some sort of rating based on the fingers. Some fingers were in, some fingers were out. 10% here, 20% there. Elbows, big, a lot to do with the elbows. Lower back turned out to be a big thing. They come out and say, no, you're denied on anything sort of hypertension, high blood pressure, cholesterol. It says no. I had thrown some things in there about persistent headaches and sinus issues. No. So things were denied. And then it does this sort of weighted average, I'm thinking, and comes up with a formula and gives you your final disability rating.
Right.
And I ended up getting a rating.
Because that disability rating enables you to get paid or essentially compensated. So you can imagine
that's right.
that any veteran who has some level of disability will get compensated by the government for the disability they've taken on as a result of their service. And so this is a process by which they assign a disability percentage or disability, that's your disability rating.
Correct.
So that was the process that you went through. You'd served in Desert Storm, you'd served in the military afterward. But really, it's about a woman today in 2024, 2023 at the time, looking and making an assessment based on all the evidence from the first, from your medical record, from the first visit. And then she sat down and asked you where you were to really make an assessment of, are they linked and are they related?
That's right. Absolutely.
Right. So I went into a VSO as a veteran service officer and they're different in every territory. So the analogy that I continue to bring up is the VA is like the IRS. You have all sorts of people who will help you with your taxes at varying levels. You have VSOs all over the country who will help you with your VA claims. So I visited a VSO. I have a persistent thing with my sinuses. And she said that is a presumptive condition of having been near the burn pits. So if they've already taken some of those things that were on your list and said, yes, that is an if-then causation of being around burn pits. So nasal problems, rhinitis or sinusitis is actually a presumptive condition. And I'd gone into the VA and they had actually done a CAT scan on my sinuses and said, yes, you have sinusitis. So because that's a presumptive condition, we submitted a claim based on Desert Storm service for sinusitis. And it all lined up, right? Now that isn't the list that you had, but that's one presumptive condition that was on my list. So the point of this is that there's, like the IRS, this is here for all of us to access if we like. There's a presumptive condition that comes about as a result of multiple types of service. And if you go through a process that you've just described, you can get some level of disability, which helps not just you, but also your family members. So if
Yeah.
something were to happen, they get access to certain levels of benefits.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm pretty sure I wrote down some sinus related thing, and they didn't even go down the path with me,
Right,
like they did with you.
right.
It just the way it sort of played out.
Yeah.
The other thing too, as I was going through the materials, they ended up retrieving the records from Northwestern, so they
Okay.
did that. So they were persistent, proactive, and persistent, and actually easy to do work with. I never thought I would use those terms with the VA based on what I'd heard in the past. You have told me that your visits with the clinic, is it Charleston?
In Myrtle Beach.
Myrtle
So
Beach,
it's,
yeah, have
it's
been positive
absolutely well
experiences. You and I have,
when
yeah,
yeah, when that woman submitted the claim, Tiffany submitted a claim on my behalf. It came up on the app 20 minutes later as
yeah.
having been submitted. So it tracks on the app the process of the claim, the process of appointments and things like that. So
The other thing too is if you rate over 30%, which in this case I do, you also your dependents are eligible. So you get a bump for having dependents. You just have to file some paperwork and marriage certificate and that sort of thing. And so Robin is also receives, or I receive some benefits for the family.
So the theme of all of these updates to the class has been, we're 60 years old in the center of mass of our age group. We have access to this benefit if we want to take the time. I thought your story was interesting because you did have to go through a series of steps. It wasn't like they didn't need the records from Northwestern.
Right.
They needed all that stuff. You needed to go through the process. But in fact, we were eligible for these types of benefits, be it disability, which is this conversation today, then of course healthcare on the other side. I really appreciate you sharing the story. When you told it to me on the phone, I thought that more classmates would benefit from hearing from it, and it's been really great, at least getting more information as we all walk through this journey.
Yeah, sure, Paul. And you can put my name, contact info out there. I'm happy to speak with any about this, and have with several classmates and other buddies. So
Will do, man. Thanks so much.
okay, take care, Paul. Thank you.